So it's time now for us to open the session for questions. Just in case you have a question, you can please unmute yourself and you can ask the question. You can type it down and I'll be able to read it out, or you could do it yourself. Yeah, please. I think someone wants to ask a question. Great. Yeah. Please, yeah. Ankurji, you can please ask your question. Unmute yourself. You've raised your hand.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for that lovely, all the speakers. Thank you so much. It was lovely. I was really touched by this part about the psychic and the part about the meditation which Amrita ji mentioned. So I was wondering, how can we do this practically in the curriculum? Because I've done an MA in spirituality, and I studied integral education and at Aurobindo Pondicherry, and I found it amazingly done there. But when it comes to the other schools where we have a curriculum, some CBSE curriculum or some other curriculum, and teachers are moving from subject to subject, class to class, how do we integrate psychic or spiritual education in practically?
Is somebody answering that, or may I take that question, Mr. Charles? Shall I try and answer that question?
You please take it.
Yeah, it is a difficult question, and you're so right when you say that teachers are so busy completing portions that to expect something like this would probably mean they have to move away from a comfort zone. But again, because I was listening into my previous speaker, we have to move out of this and create a wellness period. Maybe you do not call it spiritual education, or we don't call it meditation. We call it a wellness period, and we have a syllabi that is outlined at the beginning of the year, like how you have a breakup syllabus for each subject, where you do act 1, scene 1 today, and probably you do something else tomorrow. You see mental, physical, and heart wellness, and you break up topics, and you don't need to have a particular teacher on board for that. It should be so collaborative that each teacher should be able to link that wellness to a topic that he or she is teaching. And it is immensely possible. If a geography teacher can do the soil that is required for cotton, the history teacher can do the history of cotton, a music teacher can put it to song, and the English teacher can help the child write a poem. And then the wellness period, the wellness teacher talks about how important it is to keep the needs of the cotton farmers in mind, and to meditate for the happiness and well-being of all beings, whether it's the toil you sill, whether it is the implement used for the person using it. So it can all be linked. That way you're not really moving away from the syllabi or the curricula, but emphasize the spirituality behind every work that is done. And the person who's cleaning your classroom, who's ensuring that the desk you sit at is wiped clean every day, the people who are washing those washrooms that you use, people respect all jobs, and you celebrate a cobbler day, a carpenter day, every possible day on Saturdays or whatever, and then bring in this concept of wellness. I'm not saying that you have a theory component alone. You can even push it into what you are teaching, but compassionate teaching and the idea of feeling for a fellow human being, whether it is whoever the person is, I think should become part of education. Otherwise, we are, I think it was the dean in a university recently to a pass out group who said that universities today are churning out educated barbarians. At least the uneducated ones stole from the freight train. Now these are stealing the train itself. So, I mean, what are we doing in the name of education? That is something that all of us need to think about. If we can put our heads together, we can probably work out some which way where this can be done.
Could I add to the response here?
Because your question, please do.
I think in the beginning of the session today, this is the one thing that we started with, where I introduced the two frameworks. So there are various frameworks, and it is very critical to bring in mindfulness, spirituality, social emotional learning, which is about self-awareness, and of course various other aspects as I covered earlier. Now, one of the ways that we practically do it, of course, I agree with ma'am on everything. Alongside, I'm saying the school assembly every day can have yoga and meditation as an integral aspect. And it should. Many schools already do. Every single thing we do. So we have every concept that a teacher is teaching. The idea of sustainable development goals can easily be linked. So we ensure that when we're planning the lessons, at least one local and one global goal is taken into consideration. One real life example is taken into consideration. So these really help build. And then the curriculum, the wellness curriculum that ma'am also spoke about, has to be at the center, as we said earlier. And when we say it has to be at the center, now how do we do it? That coverage eventually has to happen also. And it is the enemy of all of these things that we want to do in school. So when we say it is at the center, and also a fellow panelist mentioned earlier that you don't have to tell children, do this, don't do this. It doesn't work. What works is stories. What works is reflections. One thing that works beautifully for us is gratitude journals. So as a practice, every single day, every person in the school, whether it is a student, a teacher, somebody cleaning, anybody and everybody writes in whichever language they prefer. Everybody writes 2 things they are grateful for on that day. And sometimes, a student may feel, I'm grateful to this Didi, or I'm grateful to this friend of mine, or I'm grateful to a particular teacher. When you have to think of 2 to 3 things every single day to write about, which are over the week different every day, you can't write the same, you can't repeat the same gratitude. You start thinking in a certain way, and that really helps. You start looking at the positive aspects of things, and you start realizing how much others are doing for me. If so much is being done for me from all over, then that sense of giving, which ma'am was earlier also talking about, that idea of seva also naturally emerges. And spiritual training is very, very critical for all of this.
Thank you so much. And I think now it's time for Vishakha Patil to ask her question. You may please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you for this wonderful concept of bringing future schools. And I really would like to thank all the panelists who have given and put forth their thoughts. Each and every one was unique and had a very core point to make. I want to ask my first question to Dr. Amrita Vohra, ma'am. When you said that ecological education is equally important, I want to know how ecological and curiosity should be something that we need to pursue. I want to know, how do you nurture curiosity in children, where a class supposes of 40 students at the same time, each student has a different curiosity. How do you address in a rigid timeline when you have to complete so much of syllabus? So I want to know that. And in terms of ecological learnings, in the digital setup, in the online setup, how do you suggest to nurture ecological learnings is my question to you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
All right, Vishakha, 2 very, very key questions. And let me address the first one first. How do you really ignite that curiosity? One of the things that I said was, of course, this, but and yes, coverage can be tough, but depends on how you're trying to teach. Are you teaching? One of the other thing that I also said was that experience is the only form of learning that will stay with the children. So they have to experience whatever concept you are trying to teach. Like Professor Sitaram also shared that, the making of those models, that experience teaches a whole lot to the children, right? So that is critical. Now, if you're trying to teach a concept by you teaching, you repeating things or making them read things and so on, then you will take longer. But what if instead of that you give children things which are relevant for that concept. You give them an inquiry statement, a problem statement, and ask them to figure out the solution. You have to be around, you have to help and support, even in the virtual, or let's call it the hybrid model. These things are possible. Let them figure out collaboratively certain solutions. They may go wrong. They may have endless questions in the process. And when you work with each little, we call them little crews, we group the students in crews. So when you reach out to each group as a mentor, you will be addressing a whole lot of questions. But the point is, remember that your job as a teacher is not to tell. The guru in our own culture, if you listen to any stories that we've all heard, we've grown up with those, right? The traditional stories. If a disciple goes to a guru with a question, usually the guru responds with another question and says, okay, go find this out, and then come back to me. By the time the disciple does all those things and comes back, the disciple mostly has an answer to the previous question, but has come back with probably another one, right? That is the way to ignite curiosity. We naturally had it in our cultural systems of teaching and learning. We somehow lost the way during the Industrial Revolution, and we've been doggedly following a certain system which is very teacher-led. We cannot do certain things in a teacher-led system, and a purely teacher-led kind of a system will only leave us worried with coverage all the time, and all the good things will fall out, which is what has essentially happened. We have to change that pedagogy. Now the classroom it doesn't have to be necessarily digital. Obviously, we are all missing children right here and now. It's much more is possible when they are in person present in school. But yet a lot is possible, and a lot of different things are possible with the integration of technology. As a teacher that you need to be able to ensure there will be still certain key elements that they'll be doubting at. So when you use technology, you do realize that on, let's say you're using Microsoft Teams, or there are various other versions also, on forms you can give branching questions. You can specifically put certain questions or certain responses which a child will end up answering if they have a certain particular confusion. Particularly in mathematics and science, that really helps. And you can then put in your response there. Again, you can also put in a follow-up question instead of a response, which ignites thinking. A strategy that we often use is called 5 times why. So if a child is asking you something, let them come back with an answer and say, okay, all right, you think so, great, why? Dig in deeper. Maybe they come back with another response to that why, then all right, then there can be another why to that response. When you ask those 5 times why and how, and a lot of thinking emerges, and that leads to ignited curiosity and an actual understanding of or what is called as scientific thinking very often. Now coming to your second part of the question on ecological literacy. The pandemic by itself taught a lot about it to all of us. It took away that human ego. We're not really the center of the universe. The COVID, this virus, which is really, really small, could actually close us all down and make us all rethink everything about us. So the pandemic itself was a big leveler and a big teacher. But other than that, a whole lot of things were possible. So children could sit in the comfort of their house and could ensure that within their little space, during the lockdown also, endless children created their own compost pits, home compost pits. Endless children learned how important it is to have that close relationship with nature. So they nurtured gardens, little gardens. Sometimes they probably did not have the space for a garden. So many did little things with window gardens and so on and so forth. And how or why would children do these little things is only if that, again, I think as teachers, we just have to be role models, and many of us on this panel have already said it. We have to just ignite that thought. We have to ignite that passion. It is within every child. And as I think Mr. Ramesh said, that the child's psychic mind is anyway more open. And so it's easier with children. As they grow older, it becomes tougher and tougher. But the minute they start enjoying those little things that they do, that closeness with nature, observing the plant that I am responsible for, looking at it grow each day, that itself builds in love. Building in within the, we are probably too much dependent on a lot of allopathic medicine. I know doctors are also on this panel, nothing against those. But there is a whole culture of alternative medicine in our country. What if you as a science teacher also talk about it and let children explore the simple medication that is there, the simplicity in haldi, which we use so much in India, and what kind of advantages can it have? So these little things have to be, they're here and now, they're everywhere and within us, within our culture, they're part of our ecology. It's just about including them. Also,
Dr. Amrita, I think, Dr. Amrita, that was really, yeah.
Thank you. I know Charles is getting really worried now.
No,
Just
right.
want to add the movement and the revolution.
And thank you so much. I mean, it was really nice, but I think we'll take one or two more questions. If we can be a little faster, if this, because we have a question that has come in from Arun, who wants to know something about the emotional quotient, right? So he's asked that. So maybe one of our panelists can take it. And then I'd like to ask a small question to Dr. Ramesh Bijlani, where he talks about punishment that comes from inside. So what happens when somebody lives in an environment where right and wrong are very fluid? Can you take that, please?
Before I come to the inner punishment, there was another question you asked about emotional quotient. Emotional quotient is a concept that Daniel Goleman came up with, and essentially it consists of a grid which has 4 aspects. On one side you have your own, and one side the others, and on the other axis of this square you have control and management. Awareness and management. So self-awareness, being aware of your own emotions. Self-management, managing your own emotions. Others awareness, be aware of the emotions of others. And others management, learn to manage the emotions of others. So basically it's those 4 aspects, and these put together constitute emotional intelligence. And it has been found that when it comes to success, particularly at the workplace, emotional intelligence counts for more than the intelligence quotient or IQ. So I think since the time is short, I can end there. The second question about an environment in which right and wrong are fluid. Now that is a mental concept. When it comes to the psychic being, the standards are absolute. So there's something called absolute ethics and something called relative ethics. The ethics of the psychic being is absolute in nature, and what gives us this fluid character is partly because you find all around you many people are doing many things which may be wrong, but then that sends our psychic being to sleep. We feel that, well, if everybody is doing it, probably it is right. It may apply to even a simple thing like how you drive on the road. Everybody is breaking the rules, so you think that is the right thing to do. The other thing is what we call conscience. Now, conscience and the voice of the psychic being are a little different, because conscience is again conditioned by our environment, whereas the psychic being is not. So the conscience is a mixture of that inner voice of the psychic being, plus whatever we have picked up from the environment as a result of the culture in which we grew up, the place where we live, and the surroundings.
Thank you so much for that. That was really wonderful. And with that, we come to the end. I'm sorry, I'm constrained. I know we could have taken it further, but since our timing was 6 and we've moved a little ahead, So forgive me for that. But once again, thank you to all our revered speakers for being with us, for sharing your views. And tomorrow we will meet with another set of speakers. Thank you, and God bless us all. Good night.